Hello, my name is Margaret Ajibade. I'm what you call the positive disruptor of the STEM world, and I want to welcome you into my domain, the STEM domain. I've started this podcast to raise awareness, to educate the public, and demystify what STEM is all about. And my first guest is Teresa Schofield. She's a chartered electronic engineer. She's been in the industry for over 40 years. And she's amazing. She's passionate about getting more females, especially young girls, into the industry. She's a mentor. She's very influential, not just in her profession, but also beyond that as well. So I would love you to welcome her and just enjoy this podcast, because it's going to change the way you see things. It's going to get you to start asking questions, and also hopefully see things in a different way as well. So thank you again. I really do believe you will enjoy this podcast. So enjoy.
I think we're going to look on this time as a time when arguments that you and I have had with society for years about the importance of science and engineering, about inclusion, about just how there is so much more opportunity if we try to solve different problems, work-life balance and mental health. All of these debates that we've been having for decades have been literally transformed in the past 2 years. And I think it's a really fascinating time.
Exactly. And I think you're 100% true in the sense of where we would like to move forward. And one of the things I do love about you is that you're a wealth of knowledge. You're like a gold mine. I want everything you have. Give it to me. And one of the things that I want to be able to do is be that what you call a positive disruptor of the STEM world, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics world. And I want to welcome the public into our domain, but also see how we as engineers, scientists, mathematicians, and technologists do what we do from the back end to the front end. But also there's so much a device role within the industry itself. What we want to do is bring that up, because we talk a lot about what we do. The general public assume they know what we do, and we ourselves assume that everybody should know what we're doing. But also it's about breaking down the myth and the things we say and how we do this. Now, the reason why this podcast, I would love to make it within an hour, which is really, but I want to condense it as well, because what we don't want to do is turn people off. I say, oh my gosh, not another. But we want to have fun.
You won't hold people's attention for too long.
Exactly. It's about the fun, but it's also looking at it from your perspective. You're a chartered engineer, an electronic engineer who's been in industry for over 40 years, and you've got a wealth of experience. But what's so fascinating, you're not just an engineer, but you're a mom as well. You're a carer. You're someone who wants to mentor others, because you've got a young person you mentioned right now, young girl. There's so many things you're doing that it's so fascinating, so wonderful. And what I want to do is celebrate you, but also look at how, from your perspective, from an electronic perspective, what are the things that, when we say the good, the bad, and the ugly, that you feel that we should really be looking at from when you started, which is quite a long time ago, 40 years in the industry, and you're still brand in that place. And I just love it. I love your energy. Your energy is amazing. It's about identifying those good, the bad, and the ugly, but not dwell on that, because we've heard it so many times. We know there are issues with the retention. We know there are issues with recruitment. We know there are issues with work-life balance. There are lots of things that maybe people are more reactive than proactive. So how do we change it? What do we do from your perspective as an a chartered, that's what you are, a chartered electronic engineer, and also how you've been able to hold things together, because your sons are engineers. I can't believe it. Because normally they run away, right? But they're actually engineers, so you're doing
Oh,
a grand
we
job.
told them, be a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a teacher, whatever, do whatever makes you happy. But unfortunately, that curiosity about science, that talent for maths is inherent, and they've gone away. And actually, do you know what? You don't have to be brilliant at maths or science. You have to want to solve problems and build things. And that, in a nutshell, is what an engineer does.
Thank you. And that's what I want you to talk about. And that's what I like you to address from that, your role and your discipline and how we can move it forward. So looking at, as I said, the good, the bad and ugly, the issues that are being faced, because again, you mentioned about you work with the industry as well as the education system and how you marry them. So tell us more about that and the things you've seen over the years and how we can then move to the next level.
Well, let me just very quickly start at the beginning and bring you to today. Okay. So as a teenage girl, I had a crush on a band, a boy band, and, had their posters on my wall. So I wrote to the BBC and said, how do I become a sound recording engineer? Thinking I could get a job in their studio and, work alongside them, as you do when you're a teenage girl.
Why not?
So the BBC wrote to me and said, go to college at 16, study electronic engineering, then go to university, get a degree in electronics, and then apply to the BBC. And I did that. I went to college at 16. They didn't tell me I was their first female student, but, there was me and 400 guys. And then I went to university, got a degree in electronics. And in my final year, literally, I'd got a job offer from the BBC and I went to a lecture and this guy said, Silicon Valley is the most exciting place on the planet and anybody who doesn't want to design silicon chips is an idiot. So I applied to Texas Instruments to design silicon chips and I ended up with 2 job offers, and I decided in the end that the one at Texas Instruments was a lot better paid, but also looked more interesting in that I'd had a really great interview with actually an Indian manager, and I joined them and no regrets. And in fact, today, one of my teammates from that time is now the chief exec of Rolls-Royce, and others are captains of industry. I won't do all the name dropping, but, now people talk about watching programs in virtual reality or augmented, in the metaverse. They're talking about who watches TV from Netflix or other channels, and we all, learn from YouTube and so on. So the technology that I thought I would be working at the BBC at 40 years ago is today still very much part of the evolution of the whole, sound, vision, engineering space. And in fact, I was just literally looking at a company who have offices in Bristol who are exhibiting a show in New York right now, and they're doing haptics. So that is where you can interact with a computer using, either touch screens or what, but this is actually waving at a screen. So you don't actually have to go into McDonald's and place your order by stabbing at it, and it, and it's a rubbish interface. So there are loads of technologies being developed that people don't even realize how much better it is today than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. But in the next 5 years, things are going to explode. Genuinely, I think we are on the cusp of so many different industries being transformed by either new silicon chips, absolutely, artificial intelligence and all these things. What goes wrong is too many of the people who have a voice about the impact of those technologies are not authentic. They're not engineers like you and me. They're people who comment. So they make people afraid of losing their jobs because of artificial intelligence or because of automation and robots taking over. Actually, we need to see a different side. You know, yes, people will lose their jobs, but what you have to be able to do, and where people like you come in, is showing people how you respond then to opportunities, how you retrain, reskill. Now, we've had a culture which is not, where companies have not invested in their people the way that they should have done. And that's across the piece, you know, that's lots and lots of, not just in the technology industry. The technology industry has been a bit worse than others. You know, I can still attend a meeting and be the only woman in the room, and I'm surrounded by, you know, team of dudes. Well, you know, I'm the mother of 2 dudes. I don't have a problem with them per se, but I think you're closing yourself to all the potential ideas if you confine the conversation to, you know, young white men, you know, programmers, whatever, you know. So I think we need to be able to encourage, as I'm doing, you know, with a 13-year-old girl in Milton Keynes, who I've taken to visit one of the biggest companies in Cambridge. And when she saw the office that the people were sat in, and, you know, saw them writing some code, and she was asking them which editor they used, and it was the same editor she uses at home, you know, and it's kind of, oh, really? I can do this. You know, this company's worth 40 billion pounds, and yet I can do this. And so we really need to just stop the negativity. There are problems, and we must be honest about them. Sure. But we need to do a lot more signposting as to how technology is going to transform even this. You know, 2 years ago, you and I would not have had this conversation as a video call, even though I could do it 25 years ago when I was at Motorola. And exactly. I talked to my colleagues in France and America routinely by video call.
Of course. I mean, and you know, you, as I said, you're a woman of so much wealth of information and knowledge that I think you can share anywhere. And I think and you're very inspiring as well. There were 2 points you made. The first one is about people afraid of change, the opportunities that are in the industry, but people are afraid because of the people who are sharing that information or not sharing it in a way that enables people to grasp the benefits of the change, rather than they look at the negatives, losing jobs or having to retrain or reskill, whatever it is they need to do in order to be able to engage with how the industry is moving itself. So based on what you have seen, based on your experience, based on what you've read, because you're very out there and you know lots of things, how do you think we can address that? That's the first point. The second point is about the young girl you're mentioning right now, and you talked about going to one of the big companies in Cambridge, and I'm assuming you took her with you, and she saw there was some. Okay, good. And then you mentioned about her recognizing the software she used at home that actually use in industry. How do we bring that to the forefront so that, you know, young people are coming up right now and they struggle to engage with how the industry is, what the industry is all about. So what would you think would be the best way to approach that and bring it to the forefront for them, so that when they're making those choices at school, they can see the engagement between their lives and the world outside. So it'd be an easier transition, an easier way of making informed decisions, both for the young person as well as their parents. So those are 2 points that you brought up, and I wanted to bring that up for you. See how you can tell me the solutions, sir.
You may need to remind me again of the first one, but very quickly on the
your mentor. Mentor, so the mentee, sorry.
Well, I mean, the tool was, you know, just a Linux editor. But what we need is for more companies to open the doors and let young people just come and have a look around. There aren't enough open days that companies hold. Now, that used to be a lot more common. When my youngest son is 30 next month, but when he was about 4 or 5, we took him to the Electrolux vacuum cleaner factory in Luton, and he saw robots delivering parts to the conveyor belt of the production line. And he was tickle pink when he could stand in front of this robot and it would stop. I mean, it's just like automatic doors as you're going into a shopping centre, you know. But that whole proximity detection and so was available 25 years ago. But he loved the idea of that, and just being able to see inside helps a lot to take away the fear. Also, we have too many of the wrong speakers. There is this belief that girls need to be inspired by somebody at the top or somebody with no experience. So it's either a current student who can't speak with authority about what happens in industry, or either some woman with a PhD, which is intimidating, or somebody from overseas. We actually need ordinary women doing jobs to sort of say, come and shadow me at my office for a day, you know, and come and see what my life really looks like when I'm, you know, when I'm dealing with this project. I mean, you know, I know young women who say, for example, are environmental engineers, and they're putting their hard hats on and they're going and checking water quality and you know, safety or whatever on sites. But you know, in many different industries, be it in the automotive industry, I was, you know, we're seeing a lot of change. So there, you know, everybody's talking about electric cars, but can you go and see one being made? You know, and so that sort of thing would be so cool if there were a lot more opportunity for people to have a look inside. And years ago, there used to be a lot more of those insights into industry, and I'd like to see that perhaps restarted. But also, we also need to look at the pathway of education. You and I have a mutual friend who is the best ambassador we know for apprenticeships. That is learning on the job. So some people, instead of going to university, are going to college and then going into a company and continuing to go to college maybe 1 or 2 days a week, but they're also doing a real job, and their abilities on that job are assessed as part of achieving that qualification. We need to see that as a continuous pathway through your life, not something you go to university at 18, you graduate at 21, you join a company, and that's it. Because the life expectancy of a baby girl born today, apparently 1 in 3 baby girls born today will live to be 100. They may be working until they're 70. Their education is not done at 21, you know.
Very true. Very true.
So we need to be able to show people that you can retrain at 35, at 55, and you know, even at 60, you can still have you know, a good runway ahead of you in order to do something that more and more is going to need experience from different places.
You know, you made a good point. Sorry, yeah. Thank you so much for that. But you made a good point, because one of the things that I've seen in industry, and I think you've seen that as well across, you know, you've been in the industry for over 40 years, or, you know, nearly there. But it's that we seem that the industry seems to have this in their head that we can only train or make use of the young generation, whereas you made a point that it's not about your, you know, as you're saying, that the stats for age for you to live long is quite high now. Before it wasn't that, but it's about understanding that you can make use of any individual, no matter what their age is, to be able to help build the industry. But I think sometimes we put the industry, for what I can hear, and I think I do agree with you, is that they've put a blockage. They're putting the hindrance, the boulders to stop people from actually progressing. They believe you have to be a certain age, you have to have a certain look, you have to be from a certain place in order for you to achieve that. But it's not true, because there's so many people, so many, especially young women, and actually doesn't matter, young people who want to get into industry, but they can't because they don't have either the skill set, they don't have the qualification, they don't have this, but they're willing to work and train, and they're not given that opportunity. So, and it's the age is, especially if you think about those who've left school or those who've had a family and they want to come back, the struggle just to get into the industry is there. So what would you say to industry to start to get them to think in a different way? Because you've made that point a few times now about the industry have the wrong people spreading certain messages, which is not helping the industry to move forward in a positive way.
Yeah, there's a lot of stereotyping. So there are roles there where people make an assumption that it can only be done by a person. Say, for example, Google, I'll use them, they now freely admit that when they were recruiting people for their software teams in Silicon Valley years ago, they would just go to the elite universities in America, to Stanford, to MIT, Harvard, or wherever. And of course, they've attained a lot of criticism for the lack of diversity in their team. Now they're saying, oh, well, we are going to the universities in Chicago and Atlanta, and we're looking at people who come from Detroit, where the automotive industry, rather than from these very scholarly backgrounds. Because at the end of the day, you've got to look at what problems are you trying to solve now. And actually, companies have evolved now to the stage where they're actually trying to solve very different problems now than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. And take, for example, a current real big interest for me is supercomputing. Now, years ago, places like NASA and CERN doing nuclear research, or big telescopes, were the only places that needed humongous, dedicated supercomputers to be crunching the problems they were trying to solve. Now it's appreciated, because of the pandemic, that these computers can help solve the genomics and of the vaccine for COVID. And so a lot of companies have done simulations about how the virus is spread, and they've looked at the models of impact on society of various lockdown measures or whatever. So, computers have been used in all sorts of different ways over the past 2 years, which has shown that ordinary sized computer is not necessarily going to hack the problems that many organizations are trying to solve. And again, I've already mentioned things like, electric vehicles, but self-driving cars. How many PowerPoints are we going to need for people to be able to charge their cars? We're seeing them at supermarkets and train stations and so on, that you can plug in your EV and go to the office. But we need to, there are so many different questions being asked that weren't even being asked 5 years ago. And that needs different people to ask those questions, I believe. And therefore, that's an opportunity. And what we need is to show people that actually nobody was an expert in this 4 years ago. Or if they were, they had a PhD in artificial intelligence. But now the tools have evolved to a stage where we're going to need hundreds of thousands of people to master how to do this. So we're making the tools easier to use and readily accessible, and, go play, and that, again, You see that with some of the STEM toys, or kits used in schools. You know, lots and lots of children will have seen a little microcomputer. I mean, even primary age children are learning to code. And so we you know, the whole conversation about the importance of science and technology is evolving very rapidly. And yeah, I think it's going to be great fun if we solve the right problems as well.
Good. Well, we need to be able to solve the right problems. We need to have the right. Well, when we say new skills, every skills itself is evolving all the time. As you mentioned, there were some certain skills that were not available then, or we weren't aware of until people started exploring, isn't it? It's all about research. Yeah. It's all about trial and error, isn't it? And if you think about big industry like Google or other or manufacturing industries, they always experiment and see, can this work? Will this work? And the challenge, before we move to that, I just wanted to go back to a point you made, because I think it's so important to address that, because it makes it easier for the flow of this podcast. As you mentioned about there's such vast opportunities. The same thing you're saying right now, to solve the right, to bring the right solution to the problems we are facing. The problems we can't really predict, but there's certain trends that we can predict that could help us to solve, at least be better prepared. The thing you mentioned, which I think is very important, it's not so much the technical skills, it's the people skills. It's what we say, how we say it, who we say it to, and how people assimilate that information. And you're saying that we've got maybe the wrong type of people speak on behalf of the industry. So how can we change that to enable the right message being put across? Because we're talking about the public. The public is made up of even we, the techies, if that makes sense. And so the only reason why we're in is because we have a passion for it, we have a love for it, or we were introduced to it. So how do we make it much more accessible, if that makes sense? And having the right type of people speak on behalf of the industry, not just from the end user perspective, but the front end. So look, marrying the front, the end, and the front, if that makes sense.
I hope you take this the right way, but one of the problems I have when people talk about women in technology is they use completely different role models for young women than they use, say, for my sons. So, for example, you know, when they talk about women in computing, they'll talk about Ada Lovelace and Grace Hopper. And believe it or not, I saw one chief exec recently give a keynote speech and talk about Florence Nightingale as a data scientist. Now, that's all very well and good, but when people speak to my sons, they're talking about Elon Musk and the Google guys and, you know, real founders and movers and shakers in Silicon Valley or industry right now. And then people don't know that something like General Motors is run by a woman engineer, Mary Barra. And there are actually quite a few companies that have female engineers at the top, and people are not aware of it. And so I think we overlook some of the great role models are out there in order to have this narrative that teenage girls need to be inspired by, you know, women who died decades or, you know, 150 years ago.
Do you know, that is so true. And I think this is a problem with us. And I think maybe, do you think we in some ways have instigated created this platform for that, because we are struggling to find more relevant or new women who are in the industry, or because they're not being showcased. All we know is about the past. We're not really looking at the now. Women.
I think for too many women, it's been too big a problem to solve. You know, there is definitely a lot of sexism or racism and so on in society right now. It's undeniable, but I think, again, in the past couple of years, the evidence is so irrefutable that we can't continue having the same conversation that we were having before. And so that's been a really positive thing, that people are now saying, okay, argument one, what do we do about it? So I think that, you know, things like being able to manage your time differently, maybe work 3 days in the office, a couple of days at home, is going to be transformational for a lot of people. But also, believe it or not, 25 years ago, a very senior man with a knighthood said to me, men want to be fathers, but they don't want to take responsibility for their children. They expect women to forfeit their careers. And yet,
well, he must be about 100 years older.
But the thing is, the woman in Oxford who developed the COVID vaccine is a mother of triplets.
Exactly. What I'm saying is that if you think about who are the guys, who are the people on top, who are the top level that you see or you hear about or speaking on behalf of the industry, are normally very, as you said, very well old, white, and they're like, I don't know, 70, 80, whatever age they are. Yeah. We don't have that middle ground. Because if you think about it, in industry itself right now, you've got young men or even middle-aged men who want to be part of their family, want to see their child grow up because of the way they've been brought up themselves. You are a prime example as well, because your children, they're influenced by what you and your husband has done. And that's who they are. And they come to you because they know you are that benchmark for them. So we need people like that. And, you know, I was just thinking, you know, you're right. And I think one of the things we need to do, and maybe you can even think about, is actually let's raise the profile of those women that are in industry right now in senior position, like you talked about General Motors and places like that, and let's write about them. Let's put them out there. Because if the young people, young girls, young male, even male as well, see them, then they can relate to them. It's not about a female thing. It's not a gender thing. No. People relating to people who are real in their industry. It shouldn't be about the gender. It should be about the skill set. It's about you, what you have produced, what you have achieved, what you say is possible. Does it make sense? And I think that's what we need to do. Because
I actually think I shouldn't really have used the example of a chief exec of a, you know, multi-billion-dollar company as an example, because I actually think we need to make being a scientist or an engineer or working with computers normal. You know, it needs to. So girls at the school gate, they know that their mother, their auntie, the lady down the street they can be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or a teacher, but you ask them to name the woman engineer or scientist in their midst, and they really struggle. So actually, we need to make it normal that women are solving these problems. And I think perhaps sometimes we struggle to make it accessible. So we think, oh, I can't talk to people about what I do. You know, hey, I'm solving this, you know, incredibly complex problem. But actually, I think we need people in the media to use their talents as journalists and communicators to actually explain things better. I mean, we all know science programs on the BBC about space or physics or whatever that are good, but actually the explanation of what an engineer does and how they're transforming so many different spheres of society has not been done nearly enough. And one of the proofs of that is, why haven't we done more on climate change before now? Because you and I both know women who have been evangelical about eco-technology for literally, you know, 30, 40 years. And when you see how, say, David Attenborough's program talking about plastics in the ocean utterly transformed the conversation about that. And now everybody wants to reduce their plastic usage. But why was it not done before, when we all knew that that was wrong, to have single-use plastics and to, you know, be tossing things into landfill? I actually hugely admire the work that Dame Ellen MacArthur does on the circular economy. But again, we need people other than her to be talking about how everything is designed to be recyclable, reusable, reduce the consumption, use clean energy, etc., you know. And so, but that means, you know, literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of engineers need to be taking this approach. And that means it's normal, not just done by special people.
I 100% agree with you. It should be a normal way. Do you know something? You're after my own heart, because you're talking what I think we've been saying, as you said, we've been talking about the same thing over and over and over and over again. And one of the reasons why I want I'm using this platform is, as you were saying, normalize things, make it be something that people can relate to. It's about raising awareness. It's about having fun. It's showing the true essence of who we are, both from the back end and the front end. It's about, you know, showcasing talent, not just talent, but people who can work, because not everyone has that perfect skill set, but they can work towards that, whatever it is they're looking. As long as they have passion, as long as they love what they're doing, then everything's possible. But it, you know, and you know, one of the things you also made mentions about having the media saying the right, speaking the right or the truth, as in, if that makes sense. But the media can only do that if you have the people who understand it. We're not saying we want to put people to sleep. What we want to say is, as you said, make it normal. What does that mean to the public? Make it normal. That means make it accessible, make it something that they can relate to, make it something that they say, oh, my neighbor's like, oh, I didn't realize that's what my neighbor does, or I can do that too. It's not difficult after all. But you know, sometimes we're drummed down with, oh, you know, you've got to do this, you got to have this, you got to if you don't know math, but math we use every day. So why are we making it so complex? And I think maybe we are our worst enemy in so many ways.
Yeah.
But I do love what you're saying, and I think, you know, what you've shown is the good, the bad, and the ugly, but also about the solution, the issues that we are facing. I think from your discipline or your roles and as a electronic engineer, a chartered engineer, so to speak, is that you can see it in your industry, in your world, the way as you grew up and why you came into the industry itself, and the issues and how, and your passion about, you know, having supercomputers and things like that, and how can we bring it to the public? What would you say how do we address that, or bring this sort of passion to the public, or raise the awareness that the public can say, oh, okay, it's not as bad as I thought. Or maybe they even were not aware that it was available, or the sort of things that were happening. Just about nowadays, you don't even it's not about touch screen, it's about just waving, or just, you know, the transmitter, having AI helping you to sort of think and see what you want to do so you can achieve what you want to get. So all those things that we used to do, as you can say, industry has moved, technology has moved on, it's evolved so much that, you know, if we're not careful, we'll take over in so many ways. But it's actually making it more, I don't know, as you say, normal again, normal to every young people coming in and who want to go into industry, or not even sure if they want to go into this, but if they are given that information available, then they can make some informed decisions, or their parents or the guardians can help them to make some informed decisions, so that when they make that transition from into the school education, they can make some good practical decisions that will help them in their journey in life as well, and they will not feel despondent, or they feel they have to do what everybody else is doing. Because even if you think about it, with the generation today, they have their people who influence them, people in the media, people, but they're using technology anyway. So what isn't this very powerful that we as engineers or STEM in the STEM world are actually influencing how the industry is working, how the influencers are helping make engaging with the world itself. Yes.
Yeah, I think there've been too many myths and narratives that have not been stereotypes that have not been pushed out the way sufficiently. So it just becomes you know, almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. That, say for example, you know, you're a professional computer scientist, you're a chartered engineer and a member of the British Computer Society and the IET, and I actually believe engineering is my profession. Now, I may have left school at 16 and gone to college and gone through a vocational path to then ultimately get my degree and become an electronic engineer and chartered. And I've also, I've been a full-time student at 5 universities because I've gone back to university and on a postgrad management course. I went back to university hoping to get a PhD, didn't finish that though. But we need to be stopping the idea that, very geeky, techie people teach themselves to code in their bedroom and they're all hackers and maybe they're just writing computer games or something or other. We need to be able to have the professionals talk about how IT is transforming the National Health Service or the way in which the trains run, and how supermarkets can make sure that they're less wasteful, they use better energy, and so every single facet of our society, and obviously including education and using online learning platforms that all those parents out there have had to teach their children during lockdown have used IT in ways that they probably didn't imagine doing before. But we need to be able to counter that narrative that all that software is written by, self-taught amateurs instead of, professionals who've studied this. And actually, I am surprised. I went to a conference on quantum computing, and I'm sad enough to be curious about what's going to happen in 10, 20 years' time.
Why not?
But one of the speakers is a woman I've known of for, literally 30 odd years. It's the first time I've ever heard her speak. She's a well-known investor in tech companies, say that we need more women to study computer science. Again,
wow.
At last,
Yes.
you're speaking out for us. We need everybody to understand, basically how society works.
Indeed.
Society is lots and lots of different technologies.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the things I am hoping that we'll be able to do as time goes by, is showcase that. Because I think the industry is so vast, it's so diverse. It's just, there's so much going on that we only know the 10%, maybe even not 10%, 5% of what really goes on within the industry. And one of the things I want to be able to do is raise the profile of our industry, of the STEM world, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the people that work within that, and also to see how we can move forward in a positive way. And I'm telling you, I'm going to have to come and interview you again. But what I would love us to do before we close up, because I really think there's so much you've given to me, and I think the public would really enjoy this conversation, is what would you be your top 5 recommendation that will help the industry to move from where we are? Because what gets me is that we say the same, we complain about the same thing, we talk about it. Okay, fine, we know it's ugly, we know there are issues. Give me a solution that will work, that it's practical, that the industry can make to help them to not just fix the now, but the future. So 5 recommendations, just take your time, but I really want that to come out and be in the forefront.
I may not, there are some that come to mind immediately because I have been saying them for a very long time.
Sure.
So one of my big ones is that unfortunately our media does not apply the same standards when talking about technology and engineering that it applies to, say, talking about the ballet, opera, literature, whatever. They will have authoritative people talk about the arts and media, sports, whatever, but not about engineering and technology. We need more good communicators in mainstream media talking about the issues that affect society in the way in which engineering and technology is developing, because there are big ethical questions. There are questions of people are looking at, do I want Google and Facebook to be reading my emails, tracking my movements, etc. The government will legislate on these things. So we need to improve the quality of debate, and there's a role for mainstream media in that. Another big issue is it needs to be much, much more inclusive. So I've always said that if a woman goes to university, gets a degree in engineering, and then 10 years down the line, she has a career break for a few years because she has 2 children, and then she's still got 40 years work ahead of her. You need to be able to show her the way in which she rejoins her career, because the tools that you offer to a woman who's had a career break will be the same tools you will offer to somebody who's had time off because they've had cancer and survived, or they've had some family emergency or whatever. And men, as well as women, who have lost their jobs in industry because those jobs no longer exist, and there will be jobs that will disappear. If we've got self-driving vehicles, maybe we won't need as many lorry drivers because they'll be driving themselves. But how do you then offer those people new jobs in emerging areas? So we need to have everybody seeing very plainly the opportunities to retrain throughout the whole of their life. Then another thing is, I think that then means that every one of us has a responsibility to be an advocate for our own profession, no matter what level you are, whether you're a 25-year-old who's completed their apprenticeship and now you have an apprentice who's 16, 18, whatever, and you're going to show them the ropes, or you're a 60-year-old guy who said, I've got all these years of industry experience, I need to be passing it on, not just to the fresh graduate, but to the person who's going to be making the decisions I'm making today in 10 years' time. So we need people to be able to make more endeavors to transmit their experience and decision-making abilities to others, because actually it's not about whether you're up to date with the latest technology. It's like you said, it's those people skills, and can you make well-informed decisions? It's do you have good judgment? Not are you the brightest and got 3 PhDs? It's that really matters at the end of the day. So as I say, we need better communication, we need better education, we need everybody to be professional and an advocate for their profession. I think we need to stop having all of these stereotypes of only the woman from HR or marketing is going to talk about what this company does. We actually need people from throughout the whole organization to talk about what the opportunities are in science and engineering in those. So we actually need to have more diversity of who speaks for an organization, but also more honesty about the challenges that there are within those organizations, so that they are kinder to people. I think there's been far too much pressure on men as well as women to either work crazy hours and forfeit a social life because you've got a PowerPoint presentation to prepare for a meeting and you're working late. There must be an appreciation that people have lives outside of work. Maybe you go and you run the local brownie pack, or you're a fantastic swimming coach or whatever. My sons have benefited from people in the community who volunteer and bring other parts of their skill set to society. And I think this idea of you just go to work and everything that you do outside of the office is completely irrelevant is wrong, because it's because you are looking around you that you see the new problems that need solving.
Very Very true, very true. But also one of the things you forgot to say is about having, especially for young girls coming up, having relevant role models rather than role models that have been dead for decades. Have those people are real, because then you can appreciate, you can relate to them, you can engage with them, because you can see where they are and see that you can journey with them. And I think that to me is an awesome recommendation. But you know, Teresa, oh, I'm hugging you right now, because you just blow me away. And you know, I truly would love to interview you again, because as I've mentioned to you before, that you've got a wealth of information, and not only that, but your passion, your hunger for what this industry is just beyond recognition.
That's the thing. If I didn't get to 5, so the last one is stay curious and be kind.
Very true. Very true. I was adding the 5th one by the role model, but yes, very true. Be curious and be kind. Be kind, I think, is so important. And also, you know, I think this ties in with it being inclusive, because for you to be included, that if you feel safe within yourself, then you include others. If you're afraid of losing your position, then you don't include others, because you get threatened, isn't it? It's changing one's mindset, changing one's approach to life, and saying that we're all ambitious, we all have hunger on different levels, but there's going to be a time where you should also embrace and bring others in your journey as well, because there's going to be a time you're going to go off the ladder, off the rails, and someone else has to come in and fit in. But unless you build, and they won't remember you, they only remember you based on the experience of it, which could be good or bad. But I am so grateful. This has been an enjoyable journey for me. You're my first interview. And you know something. No,
I'm honored.
I feel truly blessed that you agreed to do this with me and to start this journey with me. And as I said, look, please do not feel that if you have more information or you want to introduce other people, there are people you know that could add. Because we want to disrupt the way the industry is. We want to change the way and that's the reason why this platform is here. It's not to make things comfortable, it's to challenge our norm and make it more normal, if that makes sense. So what the norm has been has not worked. We want to change the norm to what is real to those people you're dealing with, because we're so diverse now, we're so global. You cannot one size doesn't fit all anymore. It's a different dynamics, it's a different way of thinking. Technology is evolving all the time, and it's affecting the whole industry. It's affecting the world as a whole. And if we don't take grasp, if you don't manage it now, we're always going to be in the same position of complaining about the same thing, still same stereotypical discrimination, you know, the things that we think because it's comfortable for us. So let's break that barrier, let's pull the walls down and move forward and charge forward, you know, engineers without walls or whatever, everything's possible nowadays. So anyway, look, Teresa, thank you. I'm so grateful to you, so grateful. But I really truly, we will talk offline anyway, but I want this has been a perfect start to this journey. So thank you so much.
And I really admire what you're doing. And it makes me feel so good that women engineers are going to have an authentic voice. And, good for you.
Thank you. Well, good for you, because you're part of that voice. And the more we have that completion, more in agreement, the more we can change things as well. But this is just a start, and it's just a beginning. But then, we are moving forward, upward, challenging those stereotypes and breaking those walls down too. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will speak offline later anyway. But yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.